In my recovery work, I've identified two primary types of trauma that people experience. Um, I call them event trauma and situation trauma. And I'm going to talk about the first one in this video. Often it happens that people have a traumatizing event in their lives. Something sudden and shocking that just completely throws them off balance. That's what I'm referring to when I talk about traumas. It can be a car accident, it can be a rape, it can be a death. But these kinds of events, especially when they happen either to us personally or to someone very close to us, can really set us off and release emotions that are just far too strong for us to deal with. For women, quite tragically, sexual abuse is often a trauma that is at the root of their substance abuse. The experience of rape is something that can be so painful, so overwhelming, that it just seems impossible to deal with. It's the total violation of a person's unique personhood. And what that kind of trauma does is it infects their entire body. It doesn't become something they just think about, it doesn't become something they just feel about. It really gets into the entire core essence of who they are, because the core essence of who they are has been violated. And as I said, the feelings that arise from that can be totally overwhelming. For men, especially veterans, there's often the experience of having seen someone die in combat or being injured themselves. It's one thing to train to be a soldier. It's something else to see a close buddy of yours blown to pieces by a landmine, especially if it's a buddy you just had breakfast with that morning. We often refer to the consequences of such an event as post-traumatic stress disorder, and it's a very real thing. It exists not just in the brain or in the head or the emotions. It gets into every cell of our being. And so when we try and deal with the emotional roots of substance abuse, and when it's related to a traumatic event, we have to dig deep and really face some very hard realities. This is the truth of what has happened. It's the nature of trauma to get into every cell of one's being. Animals have a response that occurs when they're being attacked by a predator. They have what they call the fight, flight, or freeze response. We as humans have that same response. When an animal is attacked, they'll often go into freeze mode. It might be playing dead, or it just might be not moving, hoping that the absence of movement will distract the predator. But what happens is that if they survive the attack and come out of it, they'll go through a motion. They'll go through a thing where they simply shake their entire body. They literally shake off the freeze of that attack. As humans, we don't have that. We don't know how to shake off an attack, whatever its nature. And so the therapy that needs to follow a trauma works on all kinds of levels. It works certainly on the physical, on the emotional, spiritual levels. And on the physical level, it really gets into our cells. So how do you deal with something like that? Certainly talking it through is important. But finding a way to release it physically can also be very important. One of the best ways I've found for people dealing with trauma is yoga. Yoga is a variety of exercises that people do that really allow them to focus on their breath and on their body. And in a peculiar way, yoga becomes a way of releasing trauma. So my point here is simply that when a person has had a traumatic event in their lives, they need to find a way of processing it other than substance use. When the substance use stops, like when a person goes through detox, all those painful emotions are likely to come through. So if you have experienced trauma, I ask you, I beg you, I pray for you, that you please find therapy to give you a way of talking through and releasing the pain of that trauma. And also know that it's going to take time, and that there are ways of doing so. As I said, yoga is one exceptionally helpful way for processing trauma. In conclusion, just let me say that this is my hope for you. If trauma, a traumatic event, is at the root of your substance use, please, please find help. Thank you.